Good morning. You're watching Breakfast with Louise Minchin and Dan Walker.
Our headlines for you today at 6 o'clock. Irresponsible. Doctors' leaders condemn Boris Johnson's decision to press ahead with lockdown lifting despite rising COVID infections.
Marcus Rashford says he'll never apologise for who he is after being racially abused online for his penalty miss against Italy.
England defender Tyrone Mings accuses the Home Secretary of pretending to be disgusted after her criticism of players taking the knee.
And I have spoken exclusively to Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton. He tells me he wants to change the way his sport looks forever and help young black people into engineering.
Good morning from the Great Yorkshire Show here in Harrogate. It's a celebration of all things farming and rural life, but there are growing concerns about a shortage of farm workers and what that could mean for prices in the shops.
And after yesterday's severe storms and flooding for some of you, today fewer showers around, a bit more sunshine too, and it's set to turn warmer as we head through the rest of the week. I'll have your full forecast here on Breakfast.
Morning, it's Tuesday the 13th of July. Senior doctors have criticised the Prime Minister's decision to relax coronavirus restrictions in England next week, calling the move irresponsible.
Boris Johnson has confirmed that most remaining measures, including social distancing, would be dropped from the 19th of July. But the British Medical Association has warned it could have potentially devastating consequences. Aruna Iyengar has more.
In under a week's time, life in England will look very different. No more social distancing, nightclubs will reopen and masks will no longer be legally required. But doctors are angry. They say the message from the government is unclear, even irresponsible. Boris Johnson warned yesterday that the pandemic is not over, but is still pressing ahead to ease restrictions next Monday.
What the scientists are saying is this is the right date, or as good as any other date to do this, but it's got to be taken seriously.
But the British Medical Association says there's a better time to do it, when more of the population has been fully vaccinated and when cases aren't rising so rapidly.
We cannot see any sense in why the government is removing the requirement for people to be protecting one another in a crowded underground train or a bus or in a crowded shop. It makes no sense to be knowingly accepting increasing the infection at a time when, in fact, that infection rise is translating into increased hospitalisation.
From the 19th, wearing a mask on public transport will be a matter of personal responsibility rather than the law in England. Bus and rail industry groups have said they won't require passengers to wear them. In Scotland, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will announce today whether its restrictions can be eased next Monday as is planned. Wales is due to review its restrictions on Thursday, and Northern Ireland is due to ease some COVID measures on the 26th of July. The peak of the current wave of infections is not expected before mid-August. This ward in Middlesbrough is getting ready for a surge in patients. There's uncertainty about how the virus will spread in coming months. This will be a delicate balancing act. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
So much to talk about with our political correspondent, Chris Mason, who joins us. Morning to you. And if anybody watched the news conference from the Prime Minister yesterday, there's a slight change in tone, isn't it, ahead of the July the 19th?
Yeah, morning to you. I think there's a huge change in tone. There was no sense of imminent liberation. There was no jubilation at throwing off the shackles of the rules. Instead, every syllable, every paragraph was etched with caution. And what was striking as well, Lou, is that a couple of hours later, the government published a document to supplement what we heard at the news conference. And again, that emphasis on vigilance runs throughout. And what's changed in the last week is not the government's commitment to remove in England the remaining limits on social contact. We know that those are going, and that's what they said a week ago. What's changed is that they are now taking a view on what they recommend our behaviour should be beyond next Monday. So they say that they recommend that we should wear a face mask in indoor settings where there's lots of people about. We should wear a face mask on public transport. If we've been working from home, we can be encouraged to go back to a workplace, but it doesn't all have to happen all at once. The huge question, though, and this is where we're hearing the criticism from the Doctors' Union and from Labour, is how does the government know how all of us collectively will act when we don't have government diktat, if you like, telling us how to behave? At some point, we were going to have to move to this stage. There was going to have to be a handing back of power from government to us as individuals. The question is the timing. The government thinks the timing is right in the summer. Critics don't.
And I'm sure this is a discussion we'll continue to have. Let's also talk about elsewhere, where the Home Secretary has been criticised, hasn't she, for her response to the racist abuse directed at several England players. Just take us through what's been going on.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary intervention from Tyrone Mings, the England player. I can't remember, actually, an instant where as high-profile a sporting figure has directly and publicly and unequivocally taken issue with the remarks of someone as senior in government as the Home Secretary. Take a look at this tweet from Tyrone Mings last night. He said, "You don't get to stoke the fire at the beginning of the tournament by labelling our anti-racism message, in other words, taking the knee, as gesture politics, and then pretend to be disgusted when the very thing we're campaigning against happens." And he quote tweeted the Home Secretary. For those not familiar with Twitter, that means you are talking directly to the person who has previously tweeted a message, and everyone can see that conversation. A little earlier in the day, Patel, the Home Secretary, had said that she was disgusted that England players had been subjected to what she described as vile racist abuse on social media, and it had no place in our country. And we heard from the Prime Minister a little later in the day at that news conference that he felt that those who had indulged in racist abuse against those England players should crawl back under the storm, the stone from which they had come. It shows how much anger there is among some within the England squad that some in government at the beginning of the tournament appeared equivocal about whether taking the knee was a good idea.
Chris, thank you very much for taking us through both of those. Thank you.
Marcus Rashford, Tyrone Mings' teammate, says he will never apologise for who he is after being subjected to racist abuse online for missing a penalty during that final on Sunday. Yeah,
a mural of the 23-year-old in Manchester was also defaced after that game.
We can go there live this morning. Our reporter Phil McCann is right next to it, as you can see. Phil, good morning to you. Give us an idea, I think we can see from some of the messages behind you, of how the community have responded.
Yeah, you can see it, can't you, Dan? Just look at all of this. It's been love-bombed. Now, this is a mural that was put up of Marcus Rashford late last year after he shot to fame, of course, for his free school meals campaign. These are the streets of South Manchester, Withington, where he grew up. But, well, just a few hours after he missed that penalty on Sunday night, this was defaced with racist graffiti, which has now more than been covered up. Jadon, Sancho and Bukayo, Saka, his teammates, also faced abuse online, just like Marcus Rashford did. But what we saw yesterday is that when people tried to give them abuse online, thousands more people flooded in with positive, supportive comments and trying to call out the racism. And of course, that's what you see here in physical form. Now, police are investigating the defacing that went on, but just look at some of the things that people have said here. You made us proud. Well done, Rashford. We are proud of you. Hero. And this one here, we all bleed the same colour. Racism is a pandemic too. Absolutely huge. Now, what we understand will happen later on this morning, in fact in just a few hours, is that the artist or some clean-up crews will come along to remove the racist graffiti, to restore it to the position that it was in before. And I heard the team that was behind this mural saying yesterday that this is depressing, but they thought that at some point it was predictable, likely to happen. Now, Marcus Rashford has responded to all of this. He addressed in a social media post last night, he addressed that penalty that he missed and said, "It should have gone in, but I I will never apologise for who I am and where I came from. And he said, seeing the response here in Withington has left me on the verge of tears. He said, the communities that always wrap their arms around me continue to hold me up. I'm Marcus Rashford, he said, 23-year-old black man from Withington and Wythenshawe in South Manchester. If I have nothing else, I have that.
Phil, thank you very much for that, and we'll be with Phil throughout the morning.
Yeah, and I just want to show you as well, because they give you, I mean, it's extraordinary to see all those messages this morning, give you a sense of how much it's changed in the last few hours as well, because that was obviously taken yesterday at the start of people putting these messages on that mural. And again, let's go back to the mural just really quickly now and look at that. So many different people coming down there to offer their support to Marcus Rashford.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.